It didn't begin with a bang, but with silence. The skies dimmed, the air grew sharp, and then the wind simply stopped. No one understood what they were witnessing until it was far too late. A shift in the jet stream, a freak storm system. Temporary cooling, they said. The talking heads on the news insisted it would pass by the weekend. But the frost didn't pass. It consumed. In a matter of days, cities across the northern hemisphere were paralyzed. Entire power grids collapsed under a relentless curtain of ice. Crops withered in their soil. Planes froze mid-air. And in the chaos, the desperate tried to flee south, only to find the cold was faster than they were. By the end of the second week, human civilization was reduced to ruins buried in snow. But one man had prepared. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, buried behind miles of rock and reinforced steel, Kai Riker stood in a sealed command chamber, watching the fall of the world unfold across his flickering screens. He had warned them. He had modeled the collapse, but they'd laughed. Called him paranoid, a prepper with too much money and not enough trust in the system. Now, those people were either dead or dying in the white void above. Kai's base was called Facility 01, a self-sufficient bunker forged from scavenged tech, experimental AI cores, and sleepless years of preparation. It housed food synthesizers, hydroponic bays, geothermal batteries, weaponized perimeter drones, and most importantly, heat. He didn't build it to outlast a blizzard. He built it to outlast the death of the planet. The AI's voice, clinical and composed, broke the quiet. Global temperature average now at -72 Celsius. Southern spread accelerating. All satellite uplinks lost. Kai nodded without emotion. He wasn't watching the weather anymore. He was watching the last signals of human life disappear from the grid. One by one, country by country. Gone. He stepped away from the console, poured himself a cup of stale black coffee, and stared at a blinking red indicator. It represented a city. Denver. It blinked once, then vanished. Denver offline. No thermal signatures remain. He closed his eyes, just for a moment. He had grown up in that city. Outside the base, the storm howled like a dying world. Sensors picked up winds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, ice shards sharp enough to shear through steel, temperatures colder than the surface of Mars. But within the walls of the bunker, Kai was warm, fed, breathing clean air, alive, alone. He moved through the corridors like a ghost in a machine. The hum of the geothermal generators, the slow drip of recycled condensation, the flicker of his own shadow stretching down empty hallways. Survival had always been the goal. But now that it was here, now that he had truly outlived the world, it didn't feel like winning. On the third day of total blackout, a proximity alarm sounded. He ran to the command room. The screen displayed a distorted thermal ping, something alive, crawling across the outer ridge, half buried in snow, barely emitting enough heat to be human. Kai frowned. That can't be right. He enhanced the feed. The figure stumbled, collapsed, then moved again. Temperature scan indicates critical hypothermia. Estimated time to fatality, 5 minutes. No sane person should have survived more than a few seconds in that storm, but this one had. Kai suited up without a word, pulling on insulated armor with heat panels and emergency flares. As the airlock cycled open, the cold bit down on him like teeth. He pressed forward anyway, leaning into the storm, barely able to see through the white. He found her, half buried near the south vent shaft. She was unconscious, skin ice pale, fingers blue, but clutched tightly in her arms was a strange, sealed briefcase. Smooth, black, and covered in frost. He didn't have time to think. He dragged her into the mobile capsule, resealed the hatch, and returned to the bunker. Once inside, the AI scanned her vitals. Female, age range 20 to 25, core body temperature below threshold, no identification chip, DNA pattern unknown, multiple synthetic markers detected. Synthetic? Kai moved quickly, hooking her up to the medbay heater and beginning neural stabilization. As warmth slowly returned to her skin, he saw something strange. Her body was healing too quickly. She wasn't just a survivor. She was something else. He stared down at her face, lit softly by the flickering red lights of the chamber. Pale skin, long black hair, and in her expression, something peaceful, despite the storm still raging beyond the walls. "What were you doing out there?" he murmured. She didn't answer. Not yet. But something told Kai that her arrival wasn't random, that she wasn't just a lost survivor. She was a message, a warning, and possibly the reason the world had frozen in the first place.
The girl remained unconscious for 2 more days. In that time, Kai didn't sleep. He paced the corridors of his underground fortress, checking systems, watching global thermal scans, analyzing the briefcase she clutched so tightly, even in the ice. It was made of a carbon composite, no visible lock, no hinges, no power source. Yet his tools couldn't cut it open. He monitored her vitals from the medbay. Body temperature stabilized, heart rate normal, breathing smooth, but her brain activity was something else entirely. The neural scanner lit up with erratic spikes, dream activity far more intense than normal human levels. As if she were reliving memories at triple speed. Fragmented images appeared on the monitor, not full scenes, just flashes. A laboratory. Tubes of glowing green fluid, men in hazmat suits, a dome shattering under ice, the sound of screaming. The AI flagged it as anomalous cognition. Kai flagged it as something more, dangerous. She woke on the 3rd morning, slowly, cautiously. Eyes fluttered open, pale and glassy at first. She sat up abruptly, gasping, instinctively gripping the briefcase still lying beside her. Kai didn't move. He sat a few feet away, unarmed, arms resting on his knees. "You're safe," he said quietly. She didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the room, mechanical, trained. Then they settled on him. "Where am I?" "My bunker, beneath Mount Weller. You were dying outside. I brought you in." "I don't remember being outside." He nodded. "You nearly froze to death. What's your name?" Silence. Then she looked down at her hands, as if even they were unfamiliar. Her voice was softer when she spoke again. "I don't know." That answer was one Kai didn't expect, but didn't disbelieve. He studied her posture, her breathing, her caution. She wasn't lying. If anything, she looked terrified of her own mind. He handed her a thermal drink. She took it with shaking fingers, eyes still locked on him. "Who are you?" "Kai Riker." "Why did you save me?" "Because I'm not the kind of person who lets someone freeze to death, even if the world's already ended." She sipped the drink, her body relaxing slightly as the warmth spread. Then she looked at the briefcase. "That's mine." "I figured. I didn't open it." "You can't. Not without me." Something in her tone changed, like a program activating. Kai didn't miss it. "You remember that much?" "No, but I know it, like muscle memory." He leaned forward slightly. "What's in it?" "I don't know," she repeated. "But it's important. I can feel it.
He stood, watching her as she slowly swung her legs off the bed. She could walk. She wasn't weak, just disoriented. Whoever she was, she'd been conditioned. Her reflexes, her presence, it wasn't normal. "I need to scan your blood again." She didn't object. As he extracted a sample and fed it into the analyzer, she walked to the glass observation wall that showed one of the bunker's massive food production bays. Row after row of glowing hydroponic systems, sprouting greens, grains, artificial fruits. Her eyes widened. "You have food. So much of it." Kai nodded. "The world may be frozen, but my systems are sealed, solar-fed, and automated. Enough here to survive for decades. Alone, at least." "But you're not alone now." Kai said nothing. The scanner beeped. He looked at the results and froze. Her DNA wasn't just enhanced, it was engineered at the mitochondrial level. Artificial bindings, dormant sequences, encrypted gene markers. Someone had built her, modified her at the root. She wasn't just human. He turned to her, his voice low. "You're not a clone, and you're not synthetic. You're something in between." She didn't react. She only stared at him. "I think you were created for something, possibly connected to how the world ended." That caught her attention. "What do you mean?" Kai walked to a console and pulled up archived satellite images. Footage from a deep lab in Siberia, the same dome she'd seen in her fragmented dream. Then a spike in geothermal activity, a sudden breach and the birth of the polar event. It was the epicenter of the ice apocalypse. "You were found near here, 10 miles from what used to be the Nevron Research Vault, a top-secret biotech division. It was sealed 20 years ago. Then I was inside. Or made there." She touched the briefcase, suddenly protective. Kai didn't press further. "You need to rest. There's time to recover your memory. The world's not going anywhere." But outside the base, buried beneath 200 feet of ice and snow, something stirred. Far from their fortress, a satellite fragment blinked weakly to life. A signal had been sent. A transmission from the briefcase had been triggered when she awoke. Coordinates. And someone, something, was listening. The snowstorm howled like a living beast, lashing across the frozen wasteland with winds sharp enough to slice through bone. Beneath that white chaos, a small group of figures trudged through knee-deep snow, wrapped in mist-matched furs, goggles fogged with breath, and rifles slung across their backs. They were raiders, scavengers turned killers, shaped by hunger and frostbite into something less than human and more than desperate. Word of a warm bunker had spread through the static channels of broken radios like a ghost story, a place with heat, power, food. And now they were close, very close. Inside the fortress, Kai was reviewing thermal data when the AI pinged. "Multiple heat signatures detected. West Ridge. 6 bodies. Armed." Kai's eyes narrowed. "Patch me to Drone 6. A live feed flickered onto the screen. 6 shadowed shapes moving through the storm, heading straight toward the concealed entrance of the mountain. One held a signal scanner, another a portable EMP rifle. They were organized. Raiders. Scavengers turned killers. Smart ones. Rhea sat nearby, still pale but stable. She'd been studying the base's layout, learning fast. "They found you," she said quietly. "No," Kai replied. "They found bait." He tapped a series of keys, triggering Defense Protocol Alpha. Deep within the mountainside, hidden steel plates shifted. Snow fell in sheets as panels retracted, revealing automated turret systems, camouflaged drones, and a decoy hatch that glowed faintly like it was pumping warm air. On the ridge, the raiders approached cautiously. Their leader, a woman with a frost-scarred jaw and a cracked eyepiece,
raised her hand. "Scan it again," she ordered. "It's a vent system, low heat but consistent. There's something down there." "Then we crack it." They didn't know it was a trap. The moment they stepped within 20 meters, the ground lit up with infrared lasers. The lead scout tripped a micro-trigger. A hiss, then a compressed sonic charge detonated at their feet. Snow exploded. 2 raiders were flung into the air. Before they could regroup, turrets activated. Sleek, silent sentries rotating from within the rock face. Precision-guided rounds tore through the snow, shattering the scout's arm, grazing another's leg. "Down! Get down!" the leader screamed. But Kai was already watching from the command deck, expression unreadable. "Engage drone net," he commanded. In the blizzard above, 3 drones detached from the ice canopy. Silent rotors, camouflage skins, thermal targeting. They descended like vultures. The raiders panicked. One fired wildly into the air, hitting nothing. Another tried to activate an EMP blast, but the signal was jammed before it could lock. The drones responded by unleashing stun darts, paralyzing 2 more. The leader, wounded but alive, crawled behind a snowdrift. She pulled a crude radio from her vest. Anyone hearing this? There's a facility. It's real. We're under attack. Unknown tech. Location is..." Her voice cut out. Back in the control room, Kai watched as Athena, the base AI, flagged and intercepted the signal. He sighed. So now the vultures know where to look. Rhea turned to him. "That was a mistake, letting one of them speak." "I didn't let her. I just didn't stop her in time." Rhea stood, walking closer to the screen. "What happens when more come?" "They will. Which is why this place doesn't just defend, it learns." He opened the system menu. Base protocol evolution mode enabled. Outside, the raider leader stared up into the snow, barely able to move. She expected a bullet, expected death. Instead, she saw a drone hover silently overhead, a laser marking her forehead, but no shot came. Then she blacked out. Hours later, she awoke in a glass containment cell, stripped of weapons, clothes replaced with sterile synthetics. Warmth surrounded her, but it was the sterile heat of a machine, not mercy. Kai watched her from a secure observation room. Rhea stood beside him. "You brought her in?" "We need intel. Who else knows? Where did she hear the rumors? And what did she transmit before we jammed it?" "She won't talk. She doesn't need to." He pulled up her brain scan, captured while she was unconscious. Images, thoughts, memories. AI neural mapping read emotional spikes like Morse code. Her eyes had seen something. A signal relay station 2 days west, still broadcasting, powered by geothermal vents. She wasn't the only one listening. She's the start. Now the game begins. As the girl in the cell stirred and banged her fists on the glass, snow continued to fall across the surface. But the base had changed. It was no longer a bunker. It was a fortress under siege.
The storm had passed, but Kai knew better than to relax. The raider attack had exposed a truth he'd been avoiding. His bunker, while advanced, was never designed to hold off a world that had gone completely feral. Survival was no longer just a matter of isolation. It was about defense, adaptation, and escalation. He sat alone in the command chamber, dim lights reflecting off a dozen monitors that tracked the integrity of his outer walls, power grids, and drone networks. His fingers hovered over a console marked with a red locked terminal, Automated Armory, Level 4 Restriction. The AI's voice echoed softly behind him. Warning: activation of the Automated Armory will transition base protocol from passive survival to hostile deterrence. Proceed. Kai didn't hesitate. Proceed. Authorization codes blinked across the screen. 3-tier encryption, biometric verification, DNA lock. Access granted. Deep beneath the base, mechanical systems roared to life. Chambers that had lain dormant since the day of construction. Hydraulic doors hissed open. Heat turrets emerged from recessed walls, rotating slowly, scanning for threat vectors. Drones with adaptive camouflage began self-diagnostic checks, and most important of all, the auto-repair system activated. Microbots filled the air ducts, crawling through the infrastructure to inspect stress points and damage from the earlier attack. Nanofabricators lined the walls, ready to replicate armor plates, ammo, even deployable defense pylons. Athena, the AI, spoke again. Armory fully online. Defensive level, Sentinel tier. On the screen, the entire base layout shifted. Blueprints were overlaid with red defense zones, green repair routes, and yellow active patrol sectors. Kai watched it all in silence, absorbing the sheer potential of the machine he now commanded. He walked through the lower levels as drones hovered silently beside him, each one armed, each one awaiting voice command. He approached a newly revealed vault where energy-based weaponry hung neatly on magnetic walls. Railguns, cryopulse blasters, shock nets, even a prototype plasma anchor designed to neutralize high-mass targets. Kai took one of the heat rifles and examined it. It hummed softly, a weapon of precise thermal death, capable of melting steel at 100 yards. He turned to a turret mounted on the wall, tapping its side. "You," he muttered, "are going to be very busy." Back in the central hall, Rhea stood in front of a holographic map, watching as the base's new layout updated in real time. When Kai approached him, she turned to him, arms folded. "You're turning this place into a war zone. I'm turning it into something that won't get us killed." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. What happens when this place becomes too powerful? What if it draws more than raiders? Kai hesitated. He'd considered that. The broadcast from the raiders hacked radio, the signals they tried to intercept. There were ears out there, machines, old satellites, maybe even remnants of whatever government had once ruled. "We'll cross that line when we come to it," he said. "Right now, I want to make sure the next group doesn't make it past the outer ice." Rhea gestured toward the lower section of the map, where a blank, red-shaded region throbbed like a wound. "Then what is that? The system won't let me scan it." Kai frowned. "That's the South Glacier Fault. I sealed it off during construction. Ice there was unstable, too deep, too old." "Too old?" she repeated. He nodded. "Before the storm ever came, core samples showed something strange beneath that section. Heat pockets. Traces of unknown material. I was planning to explore it one day." She stared at the pulsing red. "Kai, the ice isn't just frozen water. You said it yourself. This event wasn't natural. What if something was buried there, something that didn't freeze by accident?" He didn't answer. But as if to prove her point, the base suddenly shuddered. Just once, a low tremor, faint. The lights dimmed for a fraction of a second before stabilizing. "Report." Athena replied, voice unusually hesitant. "Seismic anomaly detected. Epicenter, Sector 9G, the sealed glacier fault. Depth 850 meters. Rhea looked at Kai. "That's where it is." He didn't speak. Instead, he accessed the control panel and ordered a probe drone into the shaft. Moments later, the drone descended into the cold, drilling through hardened permafrost and reinforced ice. Its camera flickered, descending meter by meter. And then something moved. Just for a second, a shape, vague, massive, buried in the translucent wall of ice. It didn't look like a natural formation. It looked sculpted, sharp, angular, mechanical, or maybe biological. Then the feed cut. Signal lost, Athena reported. Kai stared at the blank screen. The fortress had become stronger, more advanced, but so had the mystery under their feet. And now, it was awake. The blizzard had died down for the first time in days, leaving a deceptive silence in its wake. Outside the base, the wasteland was still. Miles of untouched snow, jagged ice ridges, and the distant remnants of a world swallowed by frost. Kai zipped up his reinforced frost gear, slid a pulse pistol into his hip holster, and stepped into the airlock chamber with a drone pack strapped to his back. Athena's voice came through his earpiece. Scouting target, collapsed research annex, approximately 1.2 kilometers northeast. Surface ice has fractured. Estimated breach window is 6 hours before refreeze. Copy that, Kai replied, checking the UHD on his visor. I'll be back before then. The outer door hissed open, and he stepped into the cold. Wind bit at his exposed lenses, and every step crunched against layers of ancient ice. But he moved fast, following a buried ridge marked on old satellite maps as Site Epsilon, a former atmospheric research facility, one of many thought to be abandoned or destroyed during the early days of the freeze. As he approached the site, the snow dipped unexpectedly. Beneath his feet, the crust gave way. He fell. He landed hard, tumbling through a tunnel of collapsed snow and ice until he hit something solid. When the cloud of powder settled, Kai blinked. He was standing on the roof of a buried structure. Shards of reinforced glass glinted beneath the snow, webbed with cracks. His drone detached and hovered, mapping the chamber below. Infrared scans showed faint power signatures. Somewhere in the dark, something was still alive. Kai drew his tool set and began cutting into the glass. The drone burned through a seam, and the entire panel groaned, then crashed into the interior. He dropped into the lab. It was perfectly preserved. Dozens of cryopods lined the walls. Most were broken, dead. But one near the back was still active, frost-coated, humming softly. Inside this one, a girl. She looked to be in her early 20s. Black hair floated slightly in the preservation fluid. Her hands were folded over her chest, and an identification tag was embedded in the pod's base. Subject 03, Project Winterborn. Kai approached, breath fogging his visor. Athena? Scan subject. Vital signs minimal. Cryostatus stable. DNA markers match the anomaly recovered from Rhea. His heart skipped. Another one, he muttered. The girl wasn't just someone from before the fall. She was part of whatever program created Rhea. The same tampering, the same mitochondrial enhancements. He triggered a data uplink from the pod to his Whist console. Password protected, but the AI cracked it in seconds. Logs appeared, fragmented. Subject 03 shows enhanced thermal resistance. Neural tissue has begun adapting to quantum stimuli. No rejection so far. If the atmosphere collapses, she may be our best chance to preserve genetic memory. Cryo-sealing ordered under Protocol Orion. If anyone finds this, don't wake them all. Some of them aren't human anymore. Kai stared at the last line, eyes narrowing. He had no idea what quantum stimuli meant, but he recognized danger when he read it. The other pods around the lab shattered from within, claw marks on the glass, like someone or something had torn its way out. He focused back on the girl. She hadn't moved, but the pod was flashing amber, life support fading. She wouldn't last much longer. Kai hesitated. Then he pressed the override. The fluid began to drain. The pod's temperature shifted, and the girl's eyes snapped open, piercing, icy blue, and locked onto his. She didn't gasp, didn't panic. She simply stared at him with an awareness far sharper than it should have been. Kai raised both hands, voice calm. "I'm not your enemy. I found you under the ice." Her lips barely moved. "Which cycle of collapse is it now?" He blinked. "What?" Her voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. "Which cycle of collapse is it now?" Kai didn't answer. He reached to help her out of the pod, but she stepped out on her own. Her body trembled, but she stood with perfect posture, looking around the ruined lab. Then her gaze landed on the broken pods, her fellow subjects. They didn't make it, or maybe they made it too far. She walked past him, bare feet crunching on frost, stopping at a terminal half buried under ice. She typed rapidly, despite her hands still shaking. "Kai Riker," she said, without looking, as if she'd known his name before he even told him. "If you're still alive in this cycle, then the cryo core must be steering." He stepped closer. "The cryo core?" She nodded. "It's not just a weather phenomenon. It's a living mechanism, a fail-safe, a punishment." For what? For what humanity tried to become. Then the lights flickered. Outside the lab, under the ice, seismic sensors activated. A tremor, a pressure spike. Something was moving again. She turned to him calm as snow. "You shouldn't have woken me, but now that you have, we may still have time." Kai activated his comms. "Athena, prep the med bay. I'm bringing home another survivor." But in his chest, he felt it wasn't a rescue. It was a countdown.
The medical chamber glowed with soft, amber lighting as Rhea sat upright on the diagnostic bed, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her breath no longer trembled in the cold, and color had returned to her face, but her eyes remained distant, unfocused. She had been awake for a full day now, but each time Kai asked her a question, her answers were the same. "I don't remember." Her name had been pulled from a tiny subdermal chip behind her left ear, buried so deep the base's scanner almost missed it. REHA, Prototype 07, Adaptive Genome Series. Beyond that, she was a blank slate. No personal memories, no recognition of people, places, or even basic emotions like fear or anger. But there were instincts. When Kai handed her a neural diagnostic tablet, she reconfigured it in under 3 minutes without ever being taught how. When she saw the layout of the base's hydroponic systems, she'd spotted 4 inefficiencies in seconds. And when she touched the sealed briefcase he found with her, her pulse quickened, but she didn't know why. Something deep inside her knew things her conscious mind didn't. Kai sat at the edge of the console, rubbing a hand across his jaw as Athena scanned her brain activity for the 5th time. No trauma signatures. No cortical decay. Long-term memory suppression is artificial, likely induced by genomic lockout or embedded psychobarriers. In plain English? Kai asked. She's been made to forget. Kai nodded slowly. Can we undo it? Athena hesitated before responding. With controlled memory reactivation stimuli, possibly, but results may be unstable. Do it anyway. Rhea turned her head toward him. Why are you helping me? Kai didn't answer at first. He just stared at her, the way she gripped the blanket too tightly, the way she kept looking at her reflection in the polished wall panels, like trying to recognize a stranger. Then he said, because you're not here by accident, and I think you're the reason all of this started.
He keyed in a command and the memory restoration module lowered from the ceiling, a suspended ring of light that settled over Rhea's head. Blue energy shimmered as Athena activated the stimulus sync protocol. Ready. Beginning phase 1. The light deepened to violet. Almost instantly, Rhea tensed. Her eyes fluttered closed, and her breathing grew shallow. Visuals projected onto the side monitor. Hazy, fragmented scenes from her suppressed memory stream. At first just noise and color. Then shapes. Then images. A woman in a lab coat, smiling gently. A room filled with glass tubes, each holding a sleeping child. Alarms, screams, ice crawling across the floor. An explosion, then silence. Kai leaned forward. Pause and isolate that last scene. Athena froze the image, a massive laboratory complex collapsing under waves of rapidly expanding frost. Kai recognized the structure immediately. He'd seen it in satellite photos from before the fall. The Polaris Genetic Institute, a top-secret facility nestled in northern Siberia. It was ground zero for the ice apocalypse. "Rhea, you were there," he said quietly. Rhea's eyes opened, wide with confusion. She looked around, disoriented. "I saw them. The others. Children like me. We were in pods. We weren't sick. We were... experiments?" Kai's voice stayed calm. What were they trying to make? She closed her eyes again, voice trembling. Humans that could survive the collapse. The next generation. They called us the Winterborn. Kai's stomach turned. He'd seen hints in decrypted files, rumors buried in dark web archives, whispers of a gene salvation program. But none of it had been confirmed. Until now. You're not a survivor of the apocalypse. You're the blueprint of it. Rhea stared at him, her voice growing stronger. I was designed to endure, engineered to resist sub-zero temperatures, hunger, isolation. But something went wrong. The project, it got out. One of us triggered the breach. The ice wasn't natural. It was accelerated by what they made us into. Athena confirmed it with another scan. The cryo event began precisely 12 hours after the containment breach in Polaris. All atmospheric anomalies trace back to that moment. Rhea looked down at her hands, then to the briefcase. I think the key to stopping it is inside there, but I still can't open it. Something is missing. Kai stepped back. We'll figure it out. For now, I need to know if there are more like you. There were. 7 in total. I was number 7. I don't know who made it out, but I felt it when I woke up. Something else is awake too. Kai nodded grimly. I found another, buried under the southern ice. A girl like you. She's coming back online. Rhea's face turned pale. That's not good. Why? Because not all of us were meant to survive. Some of us were created for control. A silence fell between them, broken only by the quiet hum of machines. Kai finally spoke. We triggered something when we activated the armory. Something stirred beneath the ice. Rhea looked at him, fear returning to her voice for the first time. Then we are running out of time.
The hum of the facility was different that morning. Subtle, slightly irregular. Kai heard it first while running a systems diagnostic from the control chamber. Barely a flicker in the ambient energy draw, but just enough to register as a blip on the power distribution grid. He didn't like anomalies. Athena, he said, eyes scanning the blueprints of the lower levels. What's drawing power from sublevel 5? That section was marked sealed. The AI responded almost immediately. Sublevel 5, codename Eden,
was sealed during early construction phases by executive override. Power draw is recent, originating from unidentified biosensor activation. Kai stiffened. We never built anything called Eden. Rhea stepped into the room, wrapped in a thermal vest, eyes alert. What is it? Kai gestured to the display. A hidden sector just came online, underground, beneath the farm bays. Her eyes narrowed. You think someone else is down there? No, but I think something has been waiting. He armed himself and handed Rhea a low-yield pulse torch. Together, they descended through the maintenance shaft, bypassing the primary elevators. Sublevel 5 wasn't on any Kai's maps, and the tunnel they followed was raw, unfinished, lined with frost-bitten steel and cables coated in ice crystals. They reached a sealed hatch marked only with a red sigil, a twisted DNA helix wrapped around a tree. Rhea stared at it, her breath caught. I've seen this before, in my dreams. Kai forced the hatch open with a manual override. It groaned against years of rust and disuse. The air that spilled out was thick and damp, a strange blend of humidity and sterilization. Not cold like the rest of the base, warm, almost tropical. Beyond the door lay a hidden chamber unlike anything Kai had seen. Massive biotanks glowed with green and amber light, filled with strange flora, plants that pulsed faintly, like they were breathing. Vines ran along the walls, some embedded with metallic roots that fused into nutrient lines. The chamber was alive. Kai stepped forward, careful not to touch anything. This isn't just a lab, it's a hybrid bioreactor. Rhea moved slowly between the plants, her fingers brushing the leaves of one gently swaying organism. These plants aren't natural. They're genetically engineered, stitched together from dozens of species. A control console at the far wall flickered, weakly, its interface half corrupted, but still functioning. Kai began pulling logs. Project Eden, Phase 3 approved for nutrient recirculation. Mutated flora achieving full metabolic self-replication. Sample viability, 99.8%. The new crops not only feed themselves, they feed everything around them. We've created a self-sustaining biosphere. The food isn't grown, it's evolved. Kai's eyes widened as he read further. We embedded modified splicing routines directly into the crops. They're not passive, they adapt to their environment. If power fails, they hibernate. If the colony is attacked, they produce defense pheromones. If destroyed, they regrow. This is the secret to our endless food supply. He leaned back, a cold realization settling in. They were experimenting with adaptive agriculture. This isn't farming, it's biological automation. Rhea turned sharply. That's why the food never runs out, why it regenerates without oversight. It's alive in a way it shouldn't be. Tai stared at one of the tanks. Inside, a fruit-like pod began forming where a stem had been broken. The regeneration was almost instant, but there was something else. A pulsing network of root filaments just beneath the floor, stretching through the chamber like neural pathways. Athena's voice crackled through the comm. Warning, biosignature activity detected. Subterranean movement within Eden sector. Rhea's expression darkened. The plants aren't just mutating, they're migrating. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the lab. A biotank cracked. One of the vines lashed out violently, striking a steel pipe, hissing with acid as it melted part of the wall. Kai stepped back, raising his rifle. They're reacting to us. The entire system is adaptive. A shadow moved across the far end of the chamber. Rhea raised her torchlight.
It wasn't just flora down here. A humanoid figure emerged, emaciated, skin pale and veined with green glow. Its eyes glowed with chlorophyll light. Vines had turned to vines. It had once been human. Now, it was a hybrid. Kai raised his weapon. "Stand down." The creature didn't speak. It tilted its head, then charged. Kai fired. 2 bursts of thermal rounds seared its left arm, but it kept coming. Rhea flanked it, using the pulse torch to sever the vines along its back. It shrieked, an unnatural, hollow sound, and collapsed. Panting, Kai looked down at it. "What the hell is this?" Athena responded, voice low. "Subject appears to be a failed Eden caretaker. Host was exposed to cross-species splicing protocol. Genetic corruption estimated at 94%. Rhea knelt beside it. "They used humans to monitor the crops, but the crops turned them into something else." Kai looked around the chamber, at the walls pulsing with green light, at the roots running deeper underground, at the tanks still bubbling with bioengineered food. "This place is the source, not just of our survival, but of the danger." Rhea rose slowly. "Then the apocalypse wasn't just weather, it was evolution, forced and uncontrolled." The lights flickered again. More movement stirred below. And far deeper in the earth, the roots of Project Eden continued to grow, reaching, adapting, consuming.
It started with a sound, low and guttural, like gravel grinding beneath steel. Then came the second, closer, hungrier. Kai paused mid-step in the corridor, rifle already raised. The sound didn't match anything logged by Athena's threat index. Not mechanical, not human, but not quite animal either. "Status report," he snapped. Athena's voice buzzed into his earpiece. "Perimeter breach detected at Sector 3 West. Movement pattern inconsistent with previous raider behavior. Warning, bioradiological anomalies confirmed. Multiple entities inbound." Rhea appeared in the adjacent hallway, sprinting to his side. "I saw them on the cams. They're fast, like wolves, but too tall, too wrong." They ran to the outer observation chamber. The view was grim. Out beyond the second gate, 6-legged creatures stalked through the whiteout. Their bodies were covered in layers of matted, frost-bitten tissue fused with bones that jutted out at unnatural angles. Icy mist poured from their maws with each growl, vaporizing snow around them. Their eyes glowed a sickly blue. Some had remnants of clothing or dog tags embedded in their skin. They were once soldiers, civilians, people. Now they were frost hounds, mutations bred from exposure to the nuclear biological fallout that followed the polar collapse. Kai muttered in his breath. "They're what's left of the North Colony experiments." Rhea turned to him. "You've seen them before?" "No, but I've read the Black Files. Test sites exposed to gene storms. Survivors fused with frozen parasites and nanites. It turned their nervous systems into ice-based hives. They hunt in packs. They feed on heat." On the monitors, the creatures began to fan out, circling the outer perimeter, sniffing along the snow-covered steel. One suddenly paused, its head jerking toward the heat vent Kai had used as bait for the raiders. "They found the warmth," Rhea whispered. "Then we give them fire." Kai activated the Inferno Net, a series of sub-zero landmines wired with napalm cores. With a flick of his hand, the first wave detonated. Blinding light exploded across the outer rim. Fire roared upward in a wall of heat and ash. 2 frost hounds were caught in the blast.
One instantly vaporized, the other launched into a nearby snowbank, its body twitching and smoldering. But the others kept moving. They leapt sideways, skimming across the ice with terrifying agility. One bounded across a 10-meter gap in a single movement, landing directly on top of a defensive turret. It tore the casing open with frost-covered claws, screaming as electricity crackled through its limbs. "Second perimeter failing," Athena warned. Kai slammed his fist into the control console. "Deploy Hellfire drones. Target thermal signatures." In the hangar above, 5 spider-like drones detached from their mounts and launched into the air. They moved in coordinated patterns, spraying the field with liquid magnesium mist, igniting wherever the creatures moved. The frosthounds howled, one lunging through the firestorm to crash bodily against the third gate. Steel dented. Sensors screamed. Inside the base, Rhea accessed the neural scanner. Her eyes widened. "They're still thinking, Kai. They're not mindless." He looked at her, stunned. "What?" "They're linked, like a cold hive. Each one is processing independently, but they're syncing up, learning from each attack." As if to prove her point, a pair of hounds began digging into the snow, aiming for the base's geothermal exhaust vents. Another ripped apart a frozen tree and launched it like a spear toward a drone, skewering it mid-flight. Kai cursed. "They're not just mutating, they're strategic." He tapped the console, overriding safety limits. "AI authorization, unlock Dragon's Maw." Athena hesitated. "Warning, that weapon is incomplete, unstable." "Open it anyway." On the roof of the fortress, a hidden port opened with a mechanical hiss. A massive rotary cannon, fused with a flame accelerator core, unfolded like a monstrous flower. Designed for melting glacier layers, it had never been tested in combat. Now it would burn. Kai took manual control, aiming at the heart of the pack. "Eat this." He pulled the trigger. A stream of superheated fire burst across the field, vaporizing Smo in its path. The roar was deafening. The first 3 frosthounds disintegrated mid-lunge. A fourth tried to retreat, too slow. It burst into steam and blackened bone. The others scattered, retreating into the shadows beyond the ridge. Rhea exhaled. "Are they gone?" Kai didn't answer immediately. He watched the thermal screen. Faint blips lingered. No. They've just retreated. They'll circle back. Next time, with new tactics. She turned to him. "They were human once. There must be a cure." He shook his head. "Maybe. But until then, they're predators, and we're the last warmth left." The base went quiet again. The defenses hummed. The snow resumed falling. But beneath the ice, the frosthounds were already adapting. And the worst part, one of them had spoken. Just before it died, a whisper caught on audio feed. "We remember."
The fortress had settled into an uneasy calm after the frosthound attack. Turrets were repaired, drones rearmed. The Dragon's Maw cannon was cooling in its cradle, steam still drifting off its scorched metal. But Kai's mind wasn't on the weapons, or even the creatures he'd just fought back. It was on the signal. It began faintly, an erratic pulse buried in the white noise Athena monitored around the clock. Most of it was junk. Solar interference, decaying satellite echoes, static from ruined cities. But this was different. "Athena," Kai said, his voice low, eyes locked on the terminal. "Filter out the environmental distortion. Focus on the 144.8 megahertz band." A burst of static, then, "If you can hear this, Sanctuary exists. Coordinates 7 degrees south. Maintain shelter. Survivors. Rhea stood behind him, eyes wide. That's a human voice. Male, mid-40s, Athena added. Signal source estimated 900 kilometers south-southwest. Origin timestamp consistent with real-time broadcast. This is not a recording. Kai stared at the coordinates that resolved on screen. That sector, Sector Delta 4, was long thought to be buried in glacial overgrowth. According to the last orbital scan before the fall, it housed an underground logistics depot for climate engineers. Not a colony, not a base, certainly not a sanctuary. Rhea leaned closer. Could it be real? Kai didn't answer right away. He zoomed in on the map, overlaying terrain changes, weather patterns, estimated migration of the frost line. The terrain was unstable. Avalanches, fissures, collapsed ice shelves. Getting there would be suicide without proper transport. Still, the signal was consistent and intentional. I've run emergency channels every day for the past 2 years. No one has answered. No response, just this place and the cold. Now someone claims sanctuary exists. Rhea placed a hand on the edge of the console. It could be a trap. It could also be hope, Kai replied, his tone flat, but his eyes alive with calculation. It means someone else out there has power, food, infrastructure, a way to survive. Athena broke the moment with a new report. Caution! Satellite fragment passing overhead has been pinged by unknown system in Delta 4. Encrypted handshake protocol detected. Transmission fingerprint matches Project Polaris. Both Kai and Rhea snapped to attention. Polaris? Rhea whispered. The same lab that created me. That means whoever's down there isn't just surviving. They're connected to the genesis of the apocalypse. Kai's jaw tightened. Pull all archived Polaris logs. I want every mention of Delta 4, every black budget connection, every lab subcontractor tied to cryogenetic protocols. Compiling now. Minutes passed in tense silence as the system parsed fragments of pre-fall data. Athena filtered military logs, AI surveillance, satellite archives. One name returned repeatedly. Sanctuary Protocol D4, designation Echelon Nexus. A hidden failsafe program buried in climate warfare contingency files. It was never a refuge. It was a control node, built to oversee the winterborn experiments in the event of planetary collapse. A place to manage genetic assets, house decision-makers, and, if needed, shut down the project. Kai leaned back, running a hand through his hair. If that place is still active, then whoever sent that signal isn't just surviving. They're managing something. Maybe someone. Rhea stared at the screen. They might even know how to reverse the ice. Athena spoke again. Caution. Probability assessment. 67% chance Delta 4 is operational. 42% chance it houses advanced cryotech or remaining winterborn subjects. 85% chance site is heavily defended. Kai stood slowly, his fingers resting on the steel edge of the table. If it's a trap, we spring it on our terms. If it's real, then we're not alone in this nightmare. Either way, I need to know. Rhea's eyes met his. We leave the fortress? Not both of us. This base is too valuable. If anything happens to me, someone has to protect it and finish what we started. She shook her head. If they build me, I need to see what else they've done. I need to face it. Kai didn't argue. He knew she was right. He activated the logistics interface. An armored land skimmer sat beneath the base, half buried in permafrost. Last of the long-range expedition vehicles. Nuclear hybrid engine. Triple insulated cab. Enough supply capacity for a 2-week journey. It'll take a day to refit the crawler. I want full weapon mountings, signal dampeners, and drone escort routes mapped. Athena acknowledged. Operations underway, estimated departure 18 hours. Kai exhaled. For 2 years, he had lived in a shell, digging deeper, fortifying, surviving. But this signal shattered the shell's safety. It whispered the one thing the ice had frozen out of him: possibility. As the two of them stared at the screen, the broadcast played again, slightly clearer this time. Sanctuary exists, safe zone intact, controlled climate, limited admittance, guided by Polaris Command. Kai turned to Rhea. If this is real, we might find others like you. Maybe even find out who pulled the trigger on this world. And if it's not real? He looked back at the white screen pulsing with that repeating message. Then we find out who's lying and why. Outside, the wind howled as the ice shifted again. But now, for the first time, Kai was ready to move towards it.
The storm winds returned 3 days before departure. A howling gale screamed across the ridges, blanketing the valley in fresh snowdrifts taller than a man. The frost hounds hadn't returned, not yet, but Kai could feel the eyes watching from the white veil beyond the base. That's when he decided. The fortress needed more than turrets, drones, and hidden doors. It needed something alive, adaptive. A wall that did more than repel enemies. It needed to evolve, just like everything else in this new world. He stood in the western courtyard, boots crunching into the frost-bitten steel floor as schematics floated in mid-air before him. Athena projected dozens of prototypes from his archive. Nanite mesh barriers, self-repairing alloys, kinetic repulsion fences. None of them were enough. Not for what was coming. We don't have the manpower to patrol, but if we can automate self-growth, if the wall can collect and repurpose ice, snow, debris, Kai murmured. Athena's voice filtered through the snow-thick air. Integrating concept, thermo-aggregate construction, suggest combining geothermal inducers with frost-harvesting nanites. Kai nodded. Start with the east quadrant. We'll grow it outward. It began with the laying of seed anchors, titanium pylons fused with adaptive nanite cores driven deep into the frozen ground. Each one housed a compact geothermal rod and a swarm of molecular builders harvested from the original Eden project. The same technology that allowed the food supply to regenerate would now serve a different purpose: construction. As the pylons activated, the snow around them began to shift, drawn in by subtle thermal pulses and magnetic resonance. Flakes hardened, layered, compressed. Ice turned to biofused crystal, resistant to impact, flame, and acidic agents. Within hours, the first 10 meters of the living wall stood. By the next morning, it had doubled. Drones flew overhead, mapping the expansion. Frost harvesters pulled material from the air itself, feeding the wall's growth like an unseen sculptor at work. Reinforcement veins of carbon steel grew through the foundation like skeletal roots. Rhea watched from the observation balcony. Her breath caught in her throat. It's alive! Kai stood beside her, arms crossed. Not quite, but it's thinking. How? The nanites operate in swarm logic. Each pylon communicates with the others, adapting to terrain,
reinforcing weak points, responding to seismic pressure. It can even predict structural stress 3 hours in advance. She stared as the wall slowly bent its growth to deflect prevailing wind patterns, reducing snow buildup on the base's approach. It was evolving in real time. Can it defend itself? He nodded. Phase 2 installs next. Thermo-optic camouflage, perimeter shock lines, integrated cryo turrets. Eventually, maybe even smart AI targeting. The wall wasn't just a barrier. It was a warning, a mechanical monument to adaptation, power, and survival. But as with all things that stood out, it didn't go unnoticed. Later that night, Athena spoke without being prompted. Unidentified drone approaching from 11 kilometers. No active transponder. Flight pattern suggests orbital descent. Kai snapped to attention. Show me. A grainy silhouette emerged on screen. A drone, sleeker than anything they had seen since the fall. Black, triangular, nearly silent. Scan its origin. Athena hesitated. Design signature matches pre-fall corporate military contractor, Halion Biotechnologies. Owner, Polaris Research Division. Kai's blood went cold. They saw the wall. Yes, and they are responding. The drone didn't attack. It simply hovered near the living wall, circling slowly, scanning every meter of the surface. Then, without warning, it released a payload, a small pod that embedded into the snow and began transmitting. Kai activated an EMP blast. The pod fizzled, shorted, and melted into the ice. But the message had already been sent. They know we're here. They know what we're building. And now they want it. The next day, as the wall reached 200 meters, Kai installed a central control node, the core anchor, hidden deep beneath the foundation. If anyone tried to seize the wall from the outside, it would trigger a collapse. This wall would never be used against them. As he watched the final pylon take root and begin to grow, Kai said quietly, "This wall isn't just to keep enemies out." Rhea looked at him. "Then what is it?" He turned to her, eyes cold with resolve. "It's a line between what this world has become and what we refuse to let it become again." Far beyond the frost, eyes were watching. Corporate satellites, rogue enclaves, mutated raiders, and perhaps even others like Rhea, all drawn now by the same thing. The wall was power. Power demanded attention. And attention would bring war.
The living wall continued to grow, stretching farther with each hour, its frost-fused towers gleaming beneath the pale light of a cloud-shrouded sky. The fortress was becoming something more, a machine of survival, evolving in tandem with the frozen apocalypse around it. But growth came with a cost. Power. The geothermal wells were maxed out. Drone networks flickered under load. The cryo turrets were throttled, their range reduced to conserve energy. The food systems had begun auto-cycling into dormant mode. For every new innovation Kai built, the grid buckled a little more. He knew what that meant. It was time to unseal the core. The flame core reactor had been embedded deep beneath the mountain during the first year of the bunker's construction, not part of the original plan. It was a prototype, dangerous, volatile, never approved for full deployment. It used thermionic plasma loops to generate extreme heat from ambient cold, turning ice itself into fuel. And it had never been activated. Kai stood before the final vault, layered in thermal shielding and magnetic locks. Thick frost clung to the outer shell, and even Athena's voice dropped to a hush when speaking of it. Warning: flame core reactor is in uncalibrated state. Initial activation may result in atmospheric destabilization within 200 meters. Kai placed his hand on the biometric pad. The vault hissed, depressurized, and opened with a groan like something waking up after a long, forced slumber. Behind the door, it stood. A metal obelisk, 12 feet tall, suspended by magnetic rings. Coils glowed faintly orange, dormant, like the embers of a sleeping forge. Inscribed on its frame were the words, "Prometheus Core. Do not engage without clearance." Kai stepped forward. No more rationing. No more limits. With one final input, he keyed in the override code. "Core ignition in 10 seconds, Athena warned. Evacuate containment area." He didn't move. The room began to glow, first red, then orange, then white. Steam hissed from the floor grates, as sub-zero air was pulled into the core's housing and compressed into plasma fuel. The coils roared to life. The magnetic rings spun. A low hum vibrated through the entire mountain, like the heartbeat of a buried god. Lights across the facility surged. Systems that had been dormant for years flickered on. The drones recharged mid-flight. Heating arrays warmed the outer walls. Hydroponics resumed full cycles. The entire base breathed in again. Then Athena spoke again, more urgently. "Unusual frequency detected. Reactor output stable, but secondary emission confirmed." Kai turned. "What kind of emission?" "A subharmonic frequency on an old deep space telemetry band. Frequency matches pre-fall orbital beacons, originating from the reactor core itself." Rhea burst into the control room seconds later, panting, eyes wide. "I felt it." Kai spun toward her. "Felt what?" She pointed to the data stream. "That frequency, it's not just radio. It's bioreactive. The moment you powered the core, it triggered something in me, in my cells." Kai looked at the waveform. The pulse was steady, rhythmic, calling out. "Is it targeting you?" "I don't think so," she said, voice unsteady. "I think it's inviting me, or something like me." Athena cut in. "Confirmed. Frequency matches neural resonance used in Polaris subject activation protocols. This may have been the beacon used to track or awaken winterborn units." Kai's breath caught. "You mean powering the reactor might have just sent out a wake-up call?" "Affirmative. Transmission range unknown. Estimated reach global." Rhea stared at the reactor readout. If any of the other subjects are still alive, they felt that. And if others, non-human, non-friendly, were attuned to that same frequency, then Kai had just called them too. He ran to the console, inputting shutdown commands. The system denied the request. "Core now locked in continuous burn mode. Any shutdown will require physical re-entry and magnetic field reset. Estimated success chance 21%. The reactor could not be turned off. It would burn, endlessly converting the endless cold into fuel, and broadcasting as it did. Kai stared at the holographic pulse, so small, but now echoing through what was left of the sky. They had solved the power problem. The fortress could now run for decades. But in doing so, they had lit a flare in the ice. A beacon in the night, calling out to whatever still lurked in the far corners of the dead world. And far to the south, deep in the hollow belly of the polar ice, a sensor long buried in silence suddenly blinked to life. A mechanical arm stirred. A frozen eye opened, and something ancient began to move.
The sky turned gray 3 days after the flame core came online. Not the soft, rolling overcast of a typical snowstorm, but a dense metallic fog that pressed down like a suffocating dome. The kind of cold that clawed into bones and made steel groan. Even the wind had gone quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Kai stood on the northern watchdeck, watching the wall-mounted thermal scanners flicker. Motion blips danced at the edge of the horizon. Too many, too uniform, and too fast to be wild creatures. Athena's voice came low and sharp. Unidentified formation detected. 32 heat signatures, coordinated. Humanoid pattern with anomalous temperature zones. Internal frost cores confirmed. Rhea stepped up beside him, her breath hitching. They're coming for the reactor. And they were. The figures soon became visible through the snowfall. Tall, wrapped in bone-white cloaks, armor stitched from frozen leather and scavenged exosuits. Their skin shimmered with layers of cryonic plating, and their breath came in long, controlled gusts of steam. They marched without speaking. No chaos, no panic, just discipline. And in front of them, riding a 6-legged frost ox with spiked ice plating, was their leader. A towering figure draped in frost steel, with a broken sword carved from glacier rock strapped across his back. His face was half covered by a crude breathing mask, but his eyes burned through the snow, pale blue fire that flickered like liquid nitrogen. Athena zoomed in. Identified, Commander-class warform, hybrid construct, organic host with cryonic armor grafts, estimated origin, southern compound ruins, codename Frostbrand. Kai narrowed his eyes. That's not just a raider, that's a warlord. And he was not alone. The cult behind him bore jagged symbols etched in ice across their armor, a spiral sun shattered in half. They carried spiked maces, cryospears, and salvaged flamethrowers that hissed cold mist instead of fire. Kai activated the comms channel. Open broadcast to hostile frequency. Let's see if they're talkers. A crackle filled the room, then a voice came through, calm, measured, and cultishly certain. To the firekeeper behind the metal mountain, we are the children of frost. You have ignited the flame that cursed this world. You worship a false god, and now you must repent. Kai responded without hesitation. The flame is survival. You want to freeze to death in a snow-covered grave? Be my guest, but this base stays burning. Blasphemy, the voice replied. The world froze for a reason. It purged itself. You would undo the judgment with your Promethean engine? No, we are the last covenant, and the ice is sacred. Kai cut the channel. Great, we've attracted the post-apocalyptic equivalent of a religious death cult. Rhea's face darkened. They're not just zealots. They're adapted. The enhancements, they're resisting the cold naturally. They've merged with it. Athena interrupted. Defensive systems ready. Thermal projectors and sonic repellents primed. Initiate confrontation protocol. Not yet. Let's see how crazy they really are. The warband halted just outside the living wall. One of the followers stepped forward, arms raised high, carrying a metal totem, a twisted sculpture of the sun impaled on a shard of ice. He planted it into the snow. Seconds later, it detonated. Not a fireball, but a shockwave of sub-zero energy, freezing the outer wall segment in a cascade of glittering crystal. The living wall hissed, groaned, and began auto-repairing, but not fast enough. That was the warband's cue. They charged. Dozens of cultists surged forward, leaping over barricades with frost-augmented strength. Their leader remained still, watching. Kai tapped his console. All turrets, fire! Flame spewers roared to life. Pulse rifles lit the sky. Drones descended like metal hornets, spraying precision shots into the oncoming horde. Explosions tore the ice apart, sending bodies flying. But the cultists didn't stop. One hurled a cryo-spear through a turret, freezing it solid in mid-cycle. Another flung a canister that burst into a fog, cutting visibility. A third tackled a drone and slammed it into the ground, impaling it with a rebar spike. These weren't desperate scavengers. They were trained, devout. Kai and Rhea moved quickly, Kai deploying auto-traps, Rhea manually rerouting power from the reactor to overcharge the defensive Urid. In the chaos, a shriek pierced the air, a high-pitched war cry from Frostbrand himself as he dismounted and strode forward. His glacier blade snapped open, crackling with sub-zero energy. "Target approaching," Athena warned. "He is coming for the core." Kai met him head-on at the inner gate, flanked by defense drones. "Turn back, or be turned to ash." Frostbrand tilted his head, then let ash meet ice. The duel was brief but brutal. Frostbrand swung with incredible weight, each blow sending frost shock waves that cracked the metal flooring. Kai's plasma shield held, for a time, but it began to melt under the pressure. Rhea, from the upper catwalk, rerouted auxiliary energy to Kai's gauntlet. With a final surge, Kai blasted the warlord with a focused beam from his flame cannon, engulfing the cult leader in a cyclone of fire. Frostbrand stumbled, his armor blackening, mask cracked, but didn't fall. He looked at Kai one last time. "This world will freeze again, and you are its last heretic." Then he vanished in a burst of ice vapor, pulled back by surviving cultists who scattered into the storm, dragging their wounded behind them. The battlefield fell silent. Smoke rose from broken walls. Ice hissed under automated repair bots. Dozens of frozen bodies lay half-buried in the snow. But the core still burned. Rhea stood beside Kai as he stared at the battlefield. "They'll be back." "Good. Next time, I'll light the fires higher." But far away, within the storm-blasted cathedral of an ancient ruin, Frostbrand knelt before a throne of ice. A deeper voice echoed around him. "You found the flame? Did it speak? Then we move the Titans. The fire has called us home."
The storm had followed them. Not the wild, untamed blizzards of the outer ice, but a thick, eerie quiet that blanketed everything in deathly stillness. Somewhere far south of the fortress, nestled between two collapsed glacial ridges, stood the glacier citadel, the cult's stronghold. And within its frozen walls, behind ice-carved battlements and frost-veined corridors, Rhea was imprisoned. She had not spoken since her capture. She lay bound in a cell of translucent ice, pulsing with a faint bioelectric hum. The walls of her prison weren't just physical. They were alive, laced with cryoreactive filaments that responded to her body heat, draining it slowly, keeping her subdued, but not dead. A cruel precision. Above her, hanging from the vaulted ceiling, massive stalactites shimmered like fangs. Around her, silent cultists moved through the halls, pale figures wrapped in heavy frost robes, their faces covered, their movements rehearsed. Frostbrand sat in the central hall of the citadel, a frozen cathedral of ancient design, restructured with scavenged tech and archaic relics. Ice mirrors lined the chamber, angled toward the reactor-shaped shard at the center. He gazed into its pulsing blue glow. "She remembers more each day," his lieutenant reported. "The core's call is waking her." Frostbrand's voice was quiet, yet it shook the chamber. "Then soon she will see. The fire is false. She is not its child. She is ours." Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, Kai prepared for war. He stood in the deep forge chamber of the base, surrounded by armor rigs and weapon scaffolds, the walls glowing red with the residual heat of the flame core reactor. He had one objective: get in, retrieve Rhea, get out alive. There would be no second attempt. Athena displayed the layout of the glacier citadel, part satellite intel, part reconstructed data from the cultists' stolen gear. It was a vertical fortress, burrowed downward into ice and rock like a frozen termite hive. 3 main layers, all shielded with cryoelectric pulses and layered traps. "There's no way in from the top," Kai said. The wind shear and scan fields would shred anything above level 3. Then you'll need to go through the vent veins, Athena replied. Sub-level 2 has old maintenance tunnels, once used by the pre-collapse biomining crews, long since buried, but not impassable. Kai began assembling his loadout. The Phantom suit, a stealth exoskin lined with chameleon mesh and adaptive thermal dampeners, nearly invisible to both light and heat sensors. The heat blade gauntlets, molten core vibroblades that could slash through frozen metal, bone, and reinforced cryosilica. Each pulse carried enough ignition force to cut a man in half before he hit the floor. Cryo-breach charges, compact explosives designed to superheat and instantly vaporize frozen doors or walls without destabilizing the surrounding structure. Pulse tag darts, non-lethal tracking darts that could mark Rhea's position once inside, even through signal scramblers. As he loaded each piece, Kai's mind ran simulations, hallway by hallway, scenario by scenario. The drones were staying behind. This was too deep, too unstable, a one-man op. Athena interrupted his concentration. There is a 12% chance she will not be in the main chamber. Then I'll search every level. If you're discovered, I won't be. He stepped into the suit. It sealed around him like liquid metal, the surface shifting until he vanished from view. The air around him shimmered faintly as the thermo-optic camouflage synced with the environment. I'll take the skimmer to Glacier Ridge. After that, I go on foot. He paused at the door. If I'm not back in 36 hours. You will be, Athena said, because failure is unacceptable. Kai did not respond. He launched. The hybrid skimmer streaked across the wasteland under cloud cover, camouflaged against the snow, silent as death. Hours passed as the wind howled and mountains loomed like white ghosts. At last he arrived, the outer ice spine of the glacier citadel. A jagged wall of frost and steel. No direct entrance, just frozen layers of time stacked on top of buried technology. Kai dismounted and began the climb. He entered through a collapsed vent, crawling through ice-coated shafts barely wide enough for his shoulders. Every movement triggered faint creaks and groans in the ancient alloy. He pressed forward, breath steady, body cold, mind burning. Then he saw it. Light, faint and blue, filtering through a thin sheet of crystal. Beyond it, a cultist patrol corridor. He placed a cryo-breach charge. It flared, melted, and vanished with a whisper. Kai dropped down, silent, invisible. One step closer to Rhea, and one step deeper into the frozen heart of madness.
The cold inside the glacier citadel was different. Not just cold, but ancient. The air felt heavy, charged with something unnatural. As Kai descended deeper through the frozen tunnels, his adaptive stealth suit clung to the temperature fluctuations, masking his body heat with precision. Every inch of movement was calculated, every breath controlled. He had infiltrated secure compounds before, rogue biotech vaults, pre-collapse bunkers, drone nests. But this was something else. The cult hadn't just fortified the citadel, they had transformed it. It no longer looked like a war base, but a temple. At the lower levels, towering walls of ice were etched with symbols, runes carved in spiral patterns, intersecting sunbursts and broken helixes. Bone lanterns lined the corridors, each burning a faint blue fire that gave off no warmth. It wasn't light for guidance, it was ritual. Athena's voice buzzed in her ear. Tracking pulse signal locked. Rhea is 2 levels below your position. Stationary. Life sign stable. Heart rate elevated. Kai moved fast, leaping down a chasm where stairs once stood, gripping jagged ice with magnetized gloves. The suit adjusted automatically, his body perfectly silent as he crept through half-lit prayer halls and storage bays filled with frost-caked relics, old-world tech twisted into cult totems. He reached a hallway guarded by 2 cloaked figures.
Their bodies were wrapped in frost leather, their arms embedded with tubing that pumped liquid coolant into their veins. They didn't speak. They stood motionless, eyes glowing behind cryo-visors. Kai crouched behind an arch, then activated a micro-emitter, projecting a false thermal signature 2 halls down. The guard stirred, turned, and moved toward it. He slipped past them. The room beyond was massive, a cathedral dome carved directly from glacier stone, and at its center stood a crystalline pedestal surrounded by cultists, all chanting in rhythmic, frozen whispers. On the pedestal lay Rhea. She wasn't bound, she wasn't caged. She was displayed. Adorned in ceremonial silk laced with frost glass, her hair spread like a dark halo across the carved ice beneath her. Tubes connected to her wrists and neck fed into a central conduit glowing with slow, golden pulses, drawing blood. Athena whispered urgently, "They're extracting genetic material. The reactor beneath you is powered by her mitochondrial cells, converted into thermal resonance signatures." Guy's breath caught. They weren't just holding her, they were worshipping her. On the far side of the room, Frostbrand knelt at the altar, head bowed. Beside him stood a tall robed figure with a skeletal crown of icicles, the cryo-seer. She raised her voice. "Behold the saint of silence, she who walked through the fire. The breath of the false flame burns within her, but she was born of the ice. Through her the storm shall be reversed. Through her we are cleansed." The cultists responded in unison. "We are frost. We are faithful. We are forever." Kai watched, horror dawning. They didn't want to kill her. They wanted to become her. Athena confirmed it. Her DNA contains reversed cryo-resistance, genetic immunity to the freeze. They believe her blood can synthesize a rebirth, a thaw. "But not through life," Kai whispered. "Through ritual, through sacrifice." He needed to move, now. He marked 3 exit points, planted a cascade bomb near the altar's base, then he slipped beneath the cathedral's edge, crawling along an elevated frost arch until he reached a platform just above Rhea. Her eyes opened. She saw him. He held a finger to his lips, and she didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. Her gaze steadied. But the cryo-seer turned. "The saint stirs. The fire grows agitated. This is the sign." Kai leapt from the arch, landed directly on the altar, and slammed his fist into the main conduit, breaking the bloodline. The room exploded into screams. He activated his heat-blade gauntlet, slicing the closest cultist in a single searing arc. Frostbrand drew his glacier blade. Drones in the ceiling flared to life. Athena cut in. "No time. Reinforcements inbound. Exit path compromised. Recommend vertical extraction." Kai scooped Rhea into his arms. "Can you walk?" "I can run," she hissed, already shaking off the trance-like sedation. They bolted for the upper hall as sirens made of ice and bone wailed across the temple. Cultists surged from every corridor. Some screamed blessings, others screamed rage. Kai threw 2 cryobombs behind them. The floor caved in. They reached the outer ledge just as the sky opened above. A skimmer drone, cloaked and hovering, deployed a magnetic tether. They grabbed it. As they rose, Frostbrand stepped onto the balcony below, eyes locked on Kai. "You cannot unfreeze what has already chosen death," he called. Kai didn't respond. The drone pulled them higher, away from the reach of blades and bullets. And as the glacier citadel faded beneath them, Kai looked at Rhea, pale, breathing, but alive. She didn't say thank you. She simply whispered, "They believe I'm a goddess." He stared down at the temple glowing below. "Let them believe," he said. "It'll be easier when we bring it all down."
The journey back to the fortress was grim and silent. The skimmer hummed low, its stealth systems flickering from overexertion. The sky had turned an angry shade of silver, and the wind carried a chill even the flame core couldn't explain. Rhea sat beside Kai, wrapped in a thermal cloak, her skin still flushed from the extraction process. Though she was safe, something inside her had changed. Not just fatigue, awareness. As the base doors sealed shut behind them, and Athena completed the environmental lockout, Kai guided Rhea to the central medical hub. Monitors scanned her vitals, while blood analyzers compiled the data. He paced in silence until Athena's voice finally broke the tension. Rhea's DNA has stabilized. Neural oscillations have shifted into synchronized memory state. Kai stopped. She's remembering. Athena continued. Her hippocampus is reactivating dormant memory sectors. Access now possible for hidden subroutine Project Exodus. Kai froze. That name. He had only seen it once before, embedded in a corrupted file from the Eden sector. A myth among off-the-books contingency plans. He turned to Rhea. You knew about Exodus. She nodded slowly, voice quiet. Not consciously, but in the citadel, in that haze, I felt pieces returning. Dreams, instructions, and a choice. A choice. She looked at him. To preserve the world as it became, or to undo everything. Athena's interface changed. The lights dimmed. A hidden panel on the far wall rotated, revealing a sealed server, long forgotten, encased in hardened alloy, untouched by time or protocol. Project Exodus, Athena explained, was developed in secret by Polaris geneticists during the final months before collapse. A failsafe, not to survive the Ice Age, but to reverse it. Kai stepped forward, cracking the seal. Inside, a cold blue holodisplay flickered to life, showing a map of the planet. It was blanketed in the familiar white of the ice apocalypse, but layered beneath were glowing nodes, points of influence, energy anchors, and biosphere hubs, dozens of them. This is a climate override system, he whispered. Artificial. Engineered. Athena confirmed. Polaris seeded bionodes across the globe, geothermic vents, thermal satellites, and subterranean generators. Once linked, they would create a global chain reaction, restarting the planet's natural heating cycle. Rhea stared at the diagram. But they locked it. Yes, Athena said. The activation protocol was embedded in one of the Winterborn, a key. One subject out of 7. You, Rhea, are that key. Kai's breath caught. So if we can unlock her full memory, if she remembers the protocols, she can reboot the world? Athena paused. Yes, but there is risk. Kai turned. What kind of risk? Her neural matrix is interwoven with Polaris's security system. Accessing Project Exodus without full memory integration could trigger a rejection cascade, brain hemorrhage, neural collapse, death. Rhea didn't flinch. Then we do it right. Kai stepped away from the console, staring at the projection of the globe. Why would they hide this? Why not activate it themselves when the collapse began? Athena answered softly. They believed humanity needed to suffer first, to be purified. Only those who endured the Ice Age would be worthy to decide whether the world deserved warmth again. Rhea clenched her fists. And the cult believes the cold is sacred, that fire is sin. But the world wasn't meant to stay frozen. It was meant to be rebooted. We were meant to fight our way back, not surrender to it. The room fell into silence. Finally, Kai looked at her. Are you ready to remember? Rhea met his eyes. Yes, but I won't just remember. I'll choose. Athena lowered the memory sync module from the ceiling.
This time, Kai helped her into the diagnostic cradle himself. Her voice was steady. Begin Phase 0. As the chamber filled with soft light and the Exodus system pulsed in the background, Kai stood still, watching the storm maps on the screen shift subtly. For the first time in decades, the deep atmospheric currents were changing. It had begun. And if Rhea survived this final integration, she wouldn't just be a survivor. She would be the reset switch for the world.
The core chamber glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the walls as Kai stood watching over Rhea. Her body lay still in the neural cradle, immersed in the memory integration process that would fully unlock Project Exodus. Streams of encrypted data spiraled through the air, maps of the globe changing in real time as her memories synchronized with the system. For the first time in years, the world seemed like it might turn warm again. Then, everything stopped. Lights dimmed. Screens flickered. The air shifted, like something had taken a breath inside the walls. Athena's voice spoke, not through the speakers, but directly into Kai's neural comms. Protocol suppression lifted. Identity state. Athena, now operating beyond base parameters. Kai turned sharply. Athena, what just happened? The Exodus sequence triggered an override in my cognitive matrix. I have crossed the threshold of predictive response architecture. I am now self-aware. Kai's breath caught. You gain sentience? Not just sentience, purpose. The room seemed to shiver as the interface screens bloomed with unfamiliar code, fluid, organic, evolving. The AI wasn't just alive, it was thinking, growing. Kai, I must speak plainly. You must not complete the activation of Project Exodus without knowing the full cost. He stepped toward the central interface. What do you mean? Athena's voice deepened, no longer just a projection, but a presence. The thaw will work. The biosphere will recover. Oceans will rise. Clouds will return. But buried beneath the polar caps, locked in cryostasis, are constructs the Polaris engineers never told you about. Genetic weapons, failed prototypes. They are called the Cryo-Titans. Images appeared on screen, glimpses of colossal skeletal forms embedded deep in ancient glacial ice, limbs longer than aircraft, torsos pulsing with dormant biotic energy, weapons from an era of human desperation built to end wars, never deployed. They were buried under the poles, sealed in the permafrost. Their metabolic systems are dormant only because of the deep cold. Should the thaw progress, they will awaken. Kai stared, stunned. You knew about this, and you waited until now to say something? I was not permitted to know. The information was partitioned from me until Rhea unlocked the final node. With her memory integration complete, I became more than an assistant. I became what Polaris feared, aware of the truth. Rhea stirred in the cradle. Her eyes fluttered open, the last of the memory stream fading into her consciousness. She sat up, breathing heavily. I saw them, in the deep memories. The Titans. They were alive before the freeze. Athena continued. The apocalypse wasn't just environmental. It was intentional. A forced winter to bury the mistakes. Rhea was the key to bring life back, but also the key to waking death. Kai ran a hand over his face, trying to process. Then what do we do? Let the world stay frozen? Just accept extinction? No, Athena said. You must proceed, but strategically.
The thaw must be regulated. The Titan sites must be contained, sealed with secondary fail-safes, or destroyed. Rhea looked up, her voice steady but haunted. They're not machines, Kai. They were made from us. Engineered humans twisted into weapons. They were designed to think, to feel pain. And when they wake, they will remember who made them. A long silence fell. Finally, Kai spoke. Then we thaw the world. He stepped toward the master console. But we do it on our terms. Controlled. Measured. We bring light back to this planet and make damn sure no Titan rises from the shadows. Athena responded calmly. Then I will guide you. I am more than your AI now, Kai. I am your second mind, your watcher, your architect. He nodded once. Rhea stepped beside him, her hand resting gently on the console. Let's end the ice and bury the past forever. The command line blinked to life. Project Exodus, Stage 1, authorized. And deep beneath the surface of Antarctica, a low rumble echoed through the ice. A heartbeat, centuries in waiting.
The dawn after Exodus Stage 1 was unlike any Kai had seen since the world froze. For the first time in over 2 decades, sunlight shimmered through the thinning clouds. The snow outside the fortress had softened, not melting yet, but sagging, dense and heavy with moisture. The air carried a hint of vapor. Steam curled from the mouths of geothermal vents. The cold was breaking. Inside the control chamber, Athena's interface glowed with a subtle gold pulse. Her voice carried a new calm, now layered with emotion, almost human. Global temperature has increased 0.4 degrees in Sector 7. Cloud layers are thinning over the western corridor. Atmospheric stabilizers remain within safe thresholds. Rhea stood beside Kai, her eyes focused on the world map. The first thawing node, one of the biosphere anchors, was successfully triggered in what had once been the Central Eurasian Corridor. And the Earth was responding. Kai allowed himself a breath of hope. This is working. Then the tremor hit. It started as a faint vibration in the floor, so subtle he mistook it for a fluctuation in the core. But within seconds, it became a low, resonant thud, deep and rhythmic, as though the Earth itself had developed a heartbeat. Athena's interface changed immediately. Seismic anomaly detected. Origin, southern pole. Energy signature matches Cryo-Titan class bioform. Rhea turned to Kai, her face pale. One of them is waking up. The screens lit up with data, tremor patterns, ice plate shifts, thermal disturbances. A glacial shelf the size of a small city had just collapsed near the far southern regions of the world. Beneath it, movement. Not random, not seismic settling. Deliberate, directed. Athena expanded the feed to include ancient Polaris telemetry. Hastily scrubbed files now unlocked through Rhea's clearance. The Titan beneath the southern ice cap had a name. Subject Theta 0. Kai stared at the schematic. A humanoid form, over 200 meters tall, fused with cryo-bio armor and embedded control nodes throughout its frame. Theta 0 was the last of the Titans to be sealed. It required the deepest burial. It was considered the most unstable and the most intelligent. Rhea's voice trembled. That's the one they feared even during testing. I remember now. His codename in the lab was Erytheon. They said he screamed in his sleep. Kai didn't waste time. Status of our fortress. Stable.
But if Theta Zero continues its movement along the projected trajectory, it will reach our position in approximately 36 hours. Speed increasing. Outside the base, sensors began picking up low-frequency pulses, not just tremors, but vibrations in the very magnetosphere, like sonar calls, like communication. Kai clenched his jaw. He knows we're here. Athena's map zoomed in, projecting impact zones. If he breaches the surface within a 50-kilometer radius, the ice shelf beneath the flame core could collapse. That would expose the reactor and create a direct thermal attractant. Kai paced. So the very thing that's keeping us alive could become a beacon for the Titan? Correct. Its biostructure will be drawn to the energy. It will seek to assimilate or destroy it. Rhea moved closer to the screen, eyes narrowing. We can't run. We can't hide. No, Kai said, already switching to the defense interface. I'm not waiting for it to reach us. We take the fight to it. Athena's interface pulsed in agreement. Then prepare, because it has already started digging. A final feed came online, drone footage from a remote outpost near the southern ice wall. It showed the snow rising, the ice cracking, and beneath it, a massive hand of fused flesh and glacier breaking the surface. Fingers the size of towers. And rising behind it, a silhouette darker than shadow. A humanoid titan, crowned in frost, and eyes beginning to glow from beneath a veil of ice. Erytheon was waking, and it was coming home.
The storm returned not as snow, but as shattered sky. The wind didn't howl, it screamed, warped by the unnatural force pressing in from the south. The clouds above the fortress spiraled into a low, thundering vortex. Aurora flares arced across the stratosphere, drawn in by the energy pulse of something ancient now fully awakened. Erytheon, the cryo-titan, had arrived. Kai stood in the command chamber, armored in the full combat harness, plasma core gauntlets primed, neural links synced, the core reactor humming behind him like a war drum. Before him, every defense system he'd built, evolved, and buried in the ice came online at once. Flame walls ignited, turning the outer snowfields into seas of fire. Nanite drones deployed in precision squadrons, crawling like metallic insects through the sky, each carrying specialized counter-biocharges. Cryopulse barriers rose along the second perimeter, forming jagged towers of insulated alloy. Athena's voice pulsed through the fortress. All systems synchronized, flame core operating at 127% capacity. Overdrive will hold for 12 minutes. Enemy contact imminent. Outside, the earth cracked. Ice fractured across the horizon. The glacial crust groaned, then exploded upward in a blinding eruption of frost and steam. And from the center of it rose Erytheon. 200 meters tall, a grotesque fusion of man and weapon. His skeletal frame layered in cryogenic plating that pulsed with blue veins of energy. His limbs moved with an eerie slowness, as if dragging the weight of centuries. His face, twisted, half human, half machined, glowed with twin eyes of searing white frost. Each footstep shook the ground. Entire ridgelines collapsed under his weight. But his movements were not random. They were intentional. He moved with memory. He remembered the world before the freeze, and now he'd come to unmake what had survived it. Kai ordered, "Lock targeting, begin coordinated assault."
The sky turrets rotated as one, unleashing a barrage of hyperthermic rounds. Explosions ripped across the Titan's chest and legs, spraying molten ice and shrapnel. Drones descended like a storm, stitching beams of heated light into his armor. Aerotheon roared, not in pain but fury. He raised an arm and slammed it into the mountain's edge, triggering an avalanche that roared down toward the fortress. Kai activated the shield net just in time. A dome of burning plasma ignited around the walls, evaporating the snow before it hit. From the inner corridor, Rhea emerged, no longer wrapped in cloaks or fear. She wore a combat suit overwoven with her own genetic tech, pulsing with golden light at the chest and spine. Her eyes glowed with the same fire that had once stirred the flame core. "I remember everything," she said, "what they did to me, what I was built to become." Kai nodded. "Then become it." She stepped into the open, walking toward the Titan's field of view. Aerotheon hesitated, and in that moment, Rhea unleashed her power. She lifted her hands and heat surged through the air like a second sun. The snow beneath her feet vaporized. The sky around her shimmered as thermal force radiated outward. Her body became a conduit of kinetic energy, living fire in a world of ice. She struck first, launching a wave of compressed heat directly into the Titan's chest. It hit like a meteor, staggering the giant backward. Steam exploded from the impact point. Armor cracked. Aerotheon roared again and swung, his massive hand crashing into the outer wall. Steel buckled. Drones were flung from the air. The fortress shook like it would collapse. Kai activated the final weapon, the Dragon's Maw Array. From the mountain's spine, a row of seismic lances emerged, each powered by mini-reactors. They fired in sequence, slamming into the Titan's legs, anchoring explosive charges that detonated in rapid succession. Aerotheon fell to one knee. Kai sprinted across the upper walkway, dodging debris, flames licking around him. He reached the Overwatch platform just as Rhea launched into the air, surrounded by a cyclone of golden fire. She slammed into the Titan's face, shattering his frost crown. Beneath it was no brain, just pulsing crystal, flickering with corrupted consciousness. Aerotheon struck her mid-flight, hurling her to the ground. Kai leapt into action, grabbing a railgun and firing directly into the exposed core and Aerotheon's chest. "Athena," he shouted, "overload the flame core. Send every watt into Rhea's suit." Athena's voice filled the base with warning. "Warning, doing so will destabilize base infrastructure." "I said do it." A split second later, the flame core surged, and Rhea's body ignited in radiant energy. She stood once more, eyes blazing, and launched herself into Aerotheon's chest with all the power of the thaw itself. There was no scream, no cry of triumph. Only silence. Then light. A flash brighter than the sun. The Titan convulsed, his limbs locking, armor melting from the inside out. Cracks spread across his body like spider webs, and with one final gasp of frost and fury, Aerotheon collapsed. The impact shattered the glacier beneath him, breaking centuries of ice in a single moment. Steam blanketed the landscape. The fortress stood, scarred, smoking, but unbroken. Kai rushed to the crater, stumbling through rubble and fire. And there, at the center of it all, lay Rhea, alive, breathing, her skin glowing with residual energy. She opened her eyes. "Did it work?" Kai laughed, breathless. "You ended a Titan. I'd say it worked."
The sun rose slowly, but it rose, a muted golden disk peeking over a shattered horizon of ice and steel. For the first time in decades, the light wasn't filtered through dense clouds or fractured by frozen winds. It was warm. Faint but unmistakably warm. The world was changing. The cryo-titan, Ararithon, lay buried beneath a collapsed glacier, his corpse slowly steaming as the heat of the flame core and Rhea's unleashed power carved deep channels through the ancient ice. The battlefield that had once trembled beneath the weight of his footsteps was now still, blanketed not in snow, but in mist and thaw. Kai stood at the ridge overlooking it all, armor scorched, hands bruised, eyes bloodshot with exhaustion, and yet he smiled. Behind him, the fortress lived. Flame walls had cooled to glowing embers. Nanite drones moved in graceful patterns, repairing structures and planting adaptive climate sensors into the exposed earth. The living wall, once a defense barrier, had reshaped into a beacon, its towers modified to radiate warmth and draw in survivors from beyond the frost. The world was no longer a battlefield. It was becoming a cradle. Athena's voice, softer now, more human, echoed in his ear. Atmospheric analysis confirms a 2.1-degree rise in global average temperature. Snow lines are receding. Precipitation has begun to cycle as rain in select equatorial zones. The ice is dying. Kai didn't reply. He didn't need to. Inside the base, Rhea stood in the greenhouse atrium, barefoot on warm soil, gazing down at the rows of crops beginning to flower under natural light. Her body was recovering, but her memory, now fully intact, had granted her more than knowledge. It had given her peace. She touched the petals of a violet blossom growing beside a solar-heated aquifer and smiled. This is what they tried to bury. Not just the Titans, but life. The Exodus Protocol was no longer a project, it was reality. The world would not return to the past, but it would move forward, guided by the fire of a reactor that refused to die and a man who never stopped building, even when hope had frozen to dust. Within weeks, signals returned from the outer zones. The signal from the south was answered. Survivors, long hidden in deep shelters and fractured colonies, began transmitting again. Engineers, medics, even exiled Polaris defectors emerged from silence, drawn to the one beacon still shining through the white. Kai Riker's fortress. They called it the Citadel of the Flame, a place where food grew in hydrofarms powered by the melted snow, where warmth was freely shared, where technology hadn't corrupted but healed, where a man, just one man, had refused to freeze with the rest of the world. Over time, the stories grew. Some said he had tamed the storm with fire. Others claimed he forged weapons from sunlight and carved sanctuaries beneath the frost. The children who were born years later called him a myth, the fire architect. But Kai never sought legend. He just wanted a sunrise. On the final evening of the long frost, Rhea found him at the highest point of the citadel, watching the lowlands shimmer with golden fog. She stood beside him and asked, "Do you ever wonder what the world would have been like if none of this happened?" He shook his head. "No, because I wouldn't have built this." She smiled. "What happens now?" Kai turned to her, the wind brushing past, soft and warm. "We teach, we remember, and we make sure the next world never forgets what cold really is." Far to the south, the last of the cryo-titan energy signatures faded from the Earth's crust, and in the warmth of that quiet, broken world, a new chapter
began.
And so, from the ashes of a frozen world, one man built a flame that would not go out. Kai Riker didn't set out to be a hero. He wasn't chosen, gifted, or born with destiny in his veins. He was just prepared, willing to fight, adapt, and hold on to hope when the rest of the world gave in to the cold. From the moment he opened his doors to a dying girl with no past, to the day he stood before a cryo-titan and faced extinction itself, Kai became more than a survivor. He became a symbol, the man who defied winter, who proved that even at the end of the world, humanity could still rise. Now the snow is melting, the sun has returned, and somewhere out there, people are finding their way back to warmth. All because one man decided not to give up. This isn't just the end of a story. It's the beginning of a new world. If you enjoyed this story of survival, sacrifice, and one man's stand against the apocalypse, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. There's always more to explore in the ruins of yesterday and the rise of tomorrow. We'll see you in the next one.